I met a younger woman, and I'm in love. We've decided to start a new life together." His voice sliced through the early evening air, quiet but deliberate, like a dagger wrapped in silk. I could still hear Kevin's laughter floating from the backyard, where balloons swayed in the breeze and the soft clink of glassware echoed against cheerful pop music. But for me, the world had gone still, suspended in a moment I would never forget. I turned slowly to face Thomas Powell, my husband of 20 years, the father of my 2 sons, the man I had once believed would hold my hand until the end of our days. There he was, standing beside me at the buffet table in our own backyard. Our home, our memories, our life behind him like forgotten wallpaper. And his eyes, they were empty. Not angry, not sad, just free. As if letting go of me was the final step in some personal liberation. My hands instinctively clenched the edge of the white linen tablecloth, pressing into the embroidered roses my mother had given us as a wedding gift. My chest tightened, but I didn't allow my breath to hitch. "Carmen," he added, softer now, leaning in so only I could hear. "Please, don't make a scene. Let's just get through Kevin's birthday, all right?" He brushed his hand over mine, formally, like a colleague might at a retirement party. And I realized then that the intimacy was gone. Gone and buried somewhere I'd never find again. "I'm sorry," he continued, "but this has been a long time coming. You know that." He didn't wait for my reply. Instead, he looked over my shoulder, his eyes brightening ever so slightly. And that's when I saw her. A girl. No, a woman. But barely. 20-something. Auburn hair twisted into an effortless bun. A body that hadn't known childbirth or heartbreak. Red dress. Heels too high for the grass, but worn like armor. She held a glass of champagne in one hand and waved coyly with the other, her smile more smug than shy. And I felt humiliated, utterly used. As if the 20 years I had poured into this man had been reduced to a line on his resume. Married once, then upgraded. My heart didn't break. It splintered. Not with the jagged pain of fresh betrayal, but with the slow, aching realization that I had become invisible to the person I had once given everything to. I am Carmen Powell. I'm 42 years old. I was born and raised in Duluth, Georgia, where sweet tea flows like gospel and people say, "Bless your heart," before they ruin your life. I loved Thomas with every ounce of the girl I used to be, and I became a woman beside him. I bore his children. I soothed his wounds. I laughed at jokes I didn't find funny. I made a home from the crumbs he left between business trips and late meetings. And still, here I was. Just another discarded chapter. "I understand," I said at last, straightening my posture. My voice didn't shake, though every cell inside me screamed. I gave him a smile so gracious it could have been mistaken for peace. "You deserve to be happy, Thomas. I hope she gives you everything you're looking for." His eyes narrowed, just slightly. Maybe he thought I'd beg. Maybe he thought I'd throw my wine glass or cry or storm out. But I didn't. I turned toward the cake. Kevin's cake. 3 tiers of chocolate and buttercream, decorated with Marvel figurines, the kind of cake a mother plans for weeks. I picked up the silver knife from the table, motioned for Kevin and his friends to gather around, and called out with perfect cheer, "Let's sing to the birthday boy." The guests were confused. Faces turned toward us with furrowed brows. The whispers had started. One woman clutched her pearls like we were on stage. I watched them glance at Audrey, still standing off to the side, sipping champagne with a tremble of awkwardness. Then Thomas did something truly repulsive. He walked to Audrey, placed a hand gently on the small of her back, and kissed her cheek. Right there, in front of our friends, our family, our neighbors. Audrey's laugh rang out like broken glass. Shrill, young, almost proud. A gasp rippled across the lawn, spreading like wildfire. One of Kevin's friends stopped mid-bite, eyes wide. My older son, Ryan, already suspecting something, clenched his jaw beside the fence. And me? I cut the cake. I smiled through every photo, posed with my son, and handed out slices, pretending not to notice the pitying glances or the murmurs behind napkins. I wrapped leftovers, gave out party favors, and made sure Kevin's night wasn't ruined, at least not by me. Because I knew something Thomas didn't. He thought he had the upper hand. He thought he'd caught me off guard. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that I had seen this moment coming long before the candles were lit. That behind my calm exterior, behind the pearls and the polite smile, something ancient had already begun to awaken. Something patient, something calculating, and something that would not be ignored. I had spent years watching him become a stranger, years pretending not to see the lipstick stains on receipts, the hotel bookings that didn't match his travel schedule. I had watched the man I married fade into a ghost, one smug enough to believe I would quietly disappear along with him. But I didn't vanish. No, I waited. And while he was busy chasing youth, I was building something else entirely. So when the last guest left and Kevin ran inside to play his new video game, I poured myself a glass of red wine, stepped onto the porch, and watched Thomas carry Audrey's suitcase to his car. She giggled again, and I realized then that she hadn't won a man. She'd adopted a child with gray hair. "Take care, Carmen," Thomas said. "I'll have the lawyer call you next week. Let's keep it civil, okay? For the boys." I raised my glass. Of course. He left without looking back, and I stood there, barefoot on the porch, the cicadas humming all around me, a soft breeze brushing my cheek like a benediction. I took a slow sip, savoring the silence, the weightless freedom of no longer pretending. I looked up at the moon and whispered to no one, "You should never underestimate a woman who's been quiet too long." But what I did next? Let's just say, Thomas never saw it coming. We met in Atlanta on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in March, the kind of day that smells like fresh earth and second chances. I was standing in line at a crowded coffee shop near Peachtree Street, juggling a dripping umbrella, a legal pad full of notes, and the weight of a long day. That's when I heard a voice behind me, low and amused. "You look like you could use something stronger than a cappuccino." I turned around, and there he was. Thomas Powell. Tan trench coat, navy suit, tie slightly loosened as if he couldn't stand rules for too long. His eyes were this stormy gray that shifted with the light, and his smile. Well, it was the kind of smile that makes you forget what you were upset about. He wasn't movie star handsome, but there was something about him that made the air feel warmer. I laughed. "Depends what you're offering." He bought me that cappuccino anyway, and a blueberry muffin I didn't ask for. We sat by the window, talked like we'd known each other forever, and he walked me to my car under his umbrella as the rain picked up again. I remember how his hand brushed mine when he opened my door, like a question he hadn't asked yet. We kept running into each other after that, first by accident, then by design. A dinner here, a jazz show there. He left little notes in my coat pockets when I wasn't looking. Things like, "You make Tuesday feel like Saturday," or "Tell me what song was playing when you fell for me." Once he showed up outside my apartment holding a bouquet of sunflowers, the kind that didn't whisper romance but shouted joy. He didn't wait for a reason. "Just because," he'd said, shrugging, eyes gleaming, "you make everything brighter." Our love didn't burn like fire. It bloomed, wide and wild, like wisteria on a forgotten trellis. We'd drive down to Savannah on random weekends, windows down, music blasting, his hand always resting on my knee. I remember dancing barefoot with him on the balcony of a little seaside inn, our laughter mingling with the crash of waves. The stars above us didn't look brighter. They looked like they had come closer just to watch. He made me feel chosen, worshipped even. And when he knelt down at the edge of Lake Lanier, the water shimmering gold beneath a late September sun, I cried before he even opened the ring box. "I want to grow old with you," he said, voice thick with emotion, hands trembling slightly. "I want your bad days, your tired mornings, your everything." And for a while, he meant every word. We married in spring, a simple ceremony under magnolia trees, our friends and family buzzing with joy. Ryan came a few years later, all energy and curiosity. Life changed, as it does, but we embraced it. The house grew louder, fuller, messier, but it was a good kind of mess, the kind that means you're building something real. I loved motherhood, even when I was exhausted, even when I was covered in applesauce and longing for 10 minutes of silence. And Thomas, he was there. He rocked Ryan to sleep with off-key lullabies, took us on spontaneous weekend getaways, fixed leaky faucets at midnight without complaint. Then, 15 years after Ryan, came Kevin. A complete surprise. We'd stopped planning for more children. But Kevin, he was a miracle wrapped in soft skin and bright eyes. I remember Thomas crying in the delivery room, whispering over and over, "He's perfect, Carmen. He's perfect." But somewhere quietly and without warning, things began to shift. Thomas got promoted. The kind of promotion that came with late nights, long trips, and a new assistant named Brianna, though she appeared in his phone as Brian. That was the first time I felt it. The cold, distant echo of something unspoken. "Long meeting," he'd say, rolling in at 11 p.m. "Client dinner ran late." He stopped leaving notes. The flowers stopped coming, but the cologne didn't. It wasn't mine. It wasn't what I bought him for Christmas. It was sharper, muskier, and it lingered on his clothes like someone else had clung to him before he came home. I started noticing more. Phone calls taken in another room, laughter through the wall that ended abruptly when I walked in, and the lies. They were small, at first. Harmless. Easy to dismiss if I really wanted to. "Didn't you have a meeting with Brian today?" "What?" "Oh yeah, he canceled." And I'd smile, I'd nod, I'd let it go, but I wasn't stupid. I just played the role well. The doting wife, the patient mother, the woman who smiled at business dinners and laughed at jokes meant to distract me. I listened more than I spoke. I observed. I remember one night in particular. Kevin was asleep, Ryan was out with friends, and I was folding laundry when I found a receipt tucked into Thomas's jacket pocket. Champagne and oysters at a restaurant we'd never been to. A reservation for 2. On a Tuesday night when he told me he was out of town. I waited for him to come home. "Traffic," he mumbled, kissing my cheek, heading straight for the shower. Exhausting day. So I asked him, calmly, casually, "How's Brianna doing?" He froze for just a second. A blink. A pause. "You mean Brian?" he said, eyes narrowing. "No, I meant Brianna. That's her name, right?" The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. "You're just being paranoid," he snapped, defensive in a way that only the guilty are. "Stop acting crazy, Carmen." Crazy. The word stung more than it should have. Not because it was cruel, but because it was calculated, designed to unnerve, to destabilize, to make me doubt my instincts. But I didn't. I knew. I knew what I was seeing. What I was hearing in the subtle shifts of his voice, in the sudden absences, in the way he no longer reached for my hand in the dark. And if being crazy meant paying attention, meant remembering who I was before him, strong, smart, capable, then maybe crazy was just another word for clarity. Maybe crazy was survival. But I said nothing more. I tucked the receipt back into his pocket. I folded his shirt, still warm from the dryer. I kissed him goodnight and rolled over in bed, letting my thoughts swirl like smoke in the quiet. Because something had begun to grow inside me. Not bitterness, not even revenge yet. Just truth. And once truth takes root, it doesn't go quietly. They say women wait. But I didn't. No, I planned. Silently, carefully. As if I were stitching lace with a needle dipped in venom. Not because I was angry, yet. But because I had learned something every betrayed woman eventually learns. Silence is not surrender. It's strategy. It started one Thursday morning, about 6 years before Kevin's 15th birthday. I remember the exact moment it all shifted. I was standing in the kitchen, still wearing my robe, pouring cereal into Kevin's bowl. Thomas was already gone, some early meeting, though the scent of cologne still hung in the air like a lie. Not the usual one I bought him. Something too bold, too young. I turned, stared out the kitchen window and thought, if this ends, where will I land? And just like that, a seed was planted. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to demand answers. I didn't need him to confess. What I needed was a plan. One he would never see coming. one that required the patience of a woman who had already given too much for too long. The first time I moved money from our joint account, it was $183.42. I remember the number because I had calculated it down to the last cent, just under the weekly grocery average. I transferred it into a checking account I opened under my maiden name, which I hadn't used in years. The banker, a woman about my age with tired eyes and a warm smile, had simply said, "Starting fresh?" Something like that. From then on, every week, or every other, if I thought he might glance at the statements, I skimmed small amounts: groceries, gas, back-to-school clothes. An unexpected vet bill for a dog we didn't have anymore. Always plausible, always forgettable. $236.19, $87.50, $142.73. Like a stream carving stone, I was slowly creating a place of my own, dollar by dollar. The account grew in silence. I kept a spreadsheet hidden deep in a password-protected folder on an old flash drive marked Taxes 2013. I updated it once a week, just after Kevin went to bed, while Thomas was in the den half watching sports and scrolling through his phone like the screen could save him. And then came the inheritance. My Aunt Lucille died in her sleep on a Sunday morning, the kind of woman who'd been all steel under lavender perfume. She left me $27,000, unexpected, generous, and private. Thomas didn't ask how much, just asked, "So, gonna get that new couch finally?" With a smirk like the money was already his. "Yes," I smiled. "I think I'll do that." Instead, I opened a high-yield savings account under my own name and tucked it all away. I did buy a couch, of course, a modest one on clearance, and showed him the receipt. He never asked for more details. Why would he? I was just his wife, dependable, predictable, invisible. I created a routine. Every financial move had a purpose, a disguise, a rhythm. I even paid off an old credit card he'd forgotten I had and began funneling money there too. Every statement was paperless, every password burned into memory. I taught myself to watch currency trends, basic investments, compound interest. I built myself a financial fluency in secret, hidden between PTA meetings and dinner prep. But it wasn't just about the money. I was building freedom. I signed up for a bookkeeping class at the local community college under the pretense of helping with the family budget. Thomas didn't object. He liked the idea of me being even better at saving him money. That class gave me something more than knowledge. It gave me proof that I could stand alone if I needed to. I got smart. I learned the laws in Georgia. I read about divorce proceedings in Duluth, about asset division, about marital versus separate property. I found legal forums and anonymous message boards filled with stories from women who had been blindsided, left penniless, and worse, powerless. And I swore I wouldn't be one of them. Then, little by little, I started shifting things at home too. I told Thomas I wanted to manage more of the household finances, to help take the load off. He laughed and handed over the spreadsheets with a dramatic sigh. "Knock yourself out." I did. I started with the bills, then the taxes, then the insurance. I made copies of everything. I photographed his W-2s, his retirement account statements, even his pay stubs when he left them on the kitchen counter. I built a digital archive on a hidden external drive behind the cleaning supplies in the garage, wrapped in a plastic bag inside a box labeled Christmas lights. He never noticed. Why would he? I still kissed him goodnight, still wore the perfume he liked, still made chicken pot pie on Tuesdays and picked up his dry cleaning on Fridays. But behind every smile was an inventory. Every shirt I folded, I thought, "You don't know what I know." Every time I ironed a wrinkle from his slacks, "You think I'm still asleep?" Every birthday, anniversary, holiday, "You're getting further from me, and I'm getting closer to free." By the time Kevin turned 10, I had built a safety net big enough to catch me, and if I played it right, big enough to tie around Thomas's neck like a noose made of velvet. There was one night, I remember it perfectly, when he came home from a conference in Charlotte. He reeked of whiskey and hotel soap. He kissed me, barely, and went straight to the shower. When I checked his phone later while folding his suitcase clothes, I saw a message flash on the screen. "Audrey, can't stop thinking about last night. You make me feel alive." I stood there, holding his shirt in my hands, the fabric still warm from his body, and felt something shift in my blood. It wasn't heartbreak. It was confirmation. So I smiled, folded the shirt, returned the phone to the charger, because the trap was already built. The escape route already carved, the moment already planned. And when the time came, when he brought her home, bold and smug in her red dress, I didn't flinch. I didn't weep. I didn't burn. Because that's what he expected. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I was ready. The manila envelope arrived on a Tuesday. It wasn't sent by mail, but hand-delivered, like some kind of ceremonial gesture. The man who brought it was dressed in a navy blazer too stiff for summer and wore a smug little smirk that said, "I know exactly what's in here and you don't stand a chance." He didn't even look me in the eye when I signed for it. Inside, clipped neatly, were the divorce papers. And there, on top, mocking in its simplicity, was a pale yellow post-it note in Thomas's unmistakable handwriting. Crisp, calculated, arrogant. Let's make this easy for the boys. No greeting, no apology, no acknowledgement of 22 years of shared life. I stood there in my kitchen, still in my soft cotton robe, the sunlight filtering through the blinds in faint golden stripes across the floor. Kevin was at school. Ryan had just moved into his first apartment. The house was quiet in that haunting way a house gets when it realizes it's been left behind. I stared at the note. Then I laughed. Not loudly. Not bitterly. Just one short exhale of disbelief, like my body had finally caught up with what my mind had been preparing for months. Easy? He wanted easy? I poured myself a glass of wine. Pinot Noir, the good bottle I'd been saving for my birthday. Then I drew a hot bath, let the steam rise around me like a cocoon, and brought the envelope in with me. Carefully, deliberately, I opened each page. I read every line, every clause, every lie. He wanted joint custody, of course, but only on weekends that didn't interfere with his business travel. He proposed keeping the lake house in his name, arguing it had been his before we were married, conveniently forgetting we'd renovated it together, down to the last goddamn tile. He offered me a generous portion of the marital assets, a vague, paltry percentage I wouldn't insult myself by repeating aloud. There were entire sections missing. Entire years of finances glossed over like they hadn't happened. It was lazy. No, worse. It was insulting. Thomas assumed I would sign, that I would cry, maybe, rage, crumble, that I would fold neatly into the shadow of my own silence. But he forgot one thing. I kept the books. He might have been the face of Powell Home Innovations, the confident man in tailored suits who shook hands at ribbon cuttings and posted inspirational quotes about leadership on LinkedIn. But I was the one who made the numbers work. I paid the bills, filed the taxes, balanced the books when his impulse purchases ran wild, and tracked vendor payments when he was too busy with client dinners. He did the talking, but I did the building. I went to my office, a modest room with soft sage walls and a cherrywood desk, and opened my drawer. Inside was a leather folder with gold trim, unmarked, unassuming. I took it out like a weapon polished for war. Inside were 6 years of documentation, receipts, statements, reports I'd quietly pulled from our shared accounts, and logs of his travel expenses, each one marked against GPS records, phone pings, and emails he never thought I'd see. I opened my laptop, logged into the folder marked Utilities Backup. Inside was everything. Copies of payments, wire transfers to accounts in names I didn't recognize, and hotel stays billed to our corporate card during conferences that had no sign-in sheets. And the kicker? A series of photos taken by a private investigator I'd hired 9 months prior, just long enough for him to get comfortable, careless, predictable. The images weren't scandalous in the tabloid sense. No lingerie, no smoking gun, just moments. Soft, damning moments. Thomas, walking out of a hotel lobby with a woman half my age, her lipstick fresh and her heels in one hand. Thomas, at dinner with the same woman 2 states away on a night he told me he was at a charity event. Thomas on the beach in Destin holding her waist the way he used to hold mine. My lawyer, Vanessa Caldwell, was a woman you underestimated at your peril. A former federal prosecutor with eyes like a hawk and a memory like a courtroom recorder. She had told me months ago, "Carmen, if he's gonna dig his grave, let him pick the shovel. Then we'll watch him trip in." And that's exactly what we did. The court date came in early fall. The leaves in Duluth had started to turn that crisp golden red that makes everything look more alive than it really is. Thomas walked into the courtroom in a tailored charcoal suit, flanked by his attorney, a young man with too much confidence and not enough files. I walked in wearing navy. No flashy jewelry, hair pulled back, calm, still, composed. The storm was inside me, and it was precise. Vanessa started gently, outlining our marriage, the years of my work behind the scenes, the financial contributions I'd made to the business. Then she dropped the documents, one by one, a stack that grew until even the judge arched an eyebrow. "Exhibit D, Your Honor," Vanessa said, flipping to a spreadsheet that showed where Thomas had moved $48,000 from one account to another. "And Exhibit E, text messages between Mr. Powell and an associate during a business trip where he claimed he was alone." The opposing lawyer objected. The judge allowed it. Thomas began to shift in his seat. His jaw tightened. Then came the shell accounts. Accounts opened in Delaware, barely traceable. But I had traced them. Then came the photos. Then came the audit logs. And then came the silence. You could have heard the fall of a paperclip in that room. He tried to argue that I was overreaching, that I was bitter, that I was trying to ruin him. But the numbers don't lie, and neither do timestamps. In the end, the court awarded me 49% of Powell Home Innovations' full custodial rights with flexible visitation. The lake house, a monthly spousal support check he would come to resent like a stone in his shoe, and all legal fees covered by him. He lost more than money that day. He lost his mask. Outside the courthouse, under a heavy gray sky, he approached me in the parking lot. I was adjusting my sunglasses when he came storming toward me like a man scorned. "You set me up," he spat, voice low and dangerous. I didn't flinch. "No, Thomas," I said, my tone even, unbothered. "You set yourself up. I just took notes." His face flushed. Not with shame, but with fury. The kind of impotent rage that comes when a man realizes the woman he underestimated outmaneuvered him in every possible way. He opened his mouth to say something else, but then he stopped. Because what more could he say? I turned, walked away. The sound of my heels against the pavement was the only punctuation that moment needed. But what Thomas didn't know, what he couldn't yet know, was that my favorite part? The most satisfying piece of this carefully arranged symphony? It hadn't happened yet. But it would. And it was scheduled to arrive in his inbox at exactly 8 a.m. the following Monday. Subject line, foreclosure. The cursor blinked at the end of that title like a heartbeat. Steady, deliberate. My hand hovered over the mouse, unmoving. On the bottom corner of the screen, the time read 7:59 a.m. One more minute. I'd rehearsed this moment 100 different ways. Wondered if I would feel triumphant, vindicated, guilty. But all I felt was a quiet, simmering calm, like the sea just before a storm breaks on the shore. The email sat open before me, neatly formatted, its contents curated over years, yes, years, with the kind of precision only betrayal can teach. Line after line of financial transactions that looked harmless in isolation, but together formed a damning mosaic. Transfers, withdrawals, offshore movements he never noticed because he never bothered to look past his own reflection. Attached were screenshots of balance sheets and records, carefully annotated, internal memos, silent flags from the IRS he'd dismissed. And the receipts. Oh, the receipts. Literal and figurative. Each one stamped with the date, the amount, the proof of his arrogance. At the end, just beneath my signature, a final line. I stayed quiet for the boys, but I never stayed blind. Then came the click. Not dramatic, not cinematic. Just deliberate. 8 a.m., send. And just like that, the truth had a timestamp. I didn't sit there watching for his reply. That wasn't the point. I closed the laptop, walked into the kitchen, and made myself a cup of coffee. The sky outside had shifted, clouds inching in from the west, heavy and low like they knew something was coming. There was a strange peace to it. Then, at exactly 9:43 p.m., the doorbell rang. 3 short bursts. No patience. I didn't need to check the peephole. I already knew. When I opened the door, there he stood. Thomas Powell, my ex-husband. The same man who once promised me forever under a canopy of garden lights, now looking like a man unraveling in real time. His tie was askew, his knuckles white against the doorframe, and his eyes, that once glossy steel blue I used to get lost in, were rimmed with bloodshot fury. "You heartless I stepped outside and shut the door behind me, fast and firm. "Don't finish that sentence," I said, low and cool. My voice was soft, but it cut sharper than any scream. He staggered back slightly, caught off guard. Thomas had always been the kind of man who expected the final word to be his. Not tonight. His jaw twitched. "You had no right?" "I had every right," I interrupted, arms crossed over the soft fabric of my cardigan. "You gave me all the permission I ever needed the moment you gave Audrey my parking spot." That stopped him. "You think this is funny?" he snapped. "No," I replied. "I think it's inevitable." He started pacing, fists clenching and unclenching at his sides like a boxer who'd just realized he'd stepped into the wrong ring. "You don't get it. You ruined me." "I warned you," I said. "When we separated, I told you to walk away clean. You wanted to play dirty. So I matched you, move for move. Only I played smarter." He sneered. "And that email? What? You want a medal for your little financial ambush?" "No," I said simply. "Just closure." He paused. Something in him flickered. Fear, maybe, or understanding, but it was gone before I could name it. "You think Audrey's gonna stand by you when she finds out you lied about the business? The condo? The offshore account you both put her name on?" I tilted my head, the same way he used to when negotiating contracts. "Because if she hasn't already seen it, she's about to." His mouth opened, but no words came out. I kept going. "I gave you every chance to make a clean exit, Thomas. Every chance. But you chose ego over empathy, pride over peace. And now?" I gestured around us, to the cold concrete porch, to the silence of the night. "Now you have nothing." He stepped closer, desperation leaking from every part of him now. "We built a life together, Carmen. You can't just erase that." "No," I agreed. "I can't erase it, but I can end it. With dignity." "Something you gave up the moment you brought a 27-year-old intern to my son's birthday party." He flinched like I'd slapped him. Good. He needed to feel something. "You want to know the worst part?" I continued, my voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't even about her. It was that you looked at me like I was something you could replace. Like 20 years was just a placeholder until something younger came along." He stared at me, eyes glassy with something I wouldn't give the dignity of calling regret. "I was your foundation," I said. "While you played CEO, I played every other role. Bookkeeper, event planner, therapist, chef, mother, lover, damage control expert. I held you up while you were too busy holding yourself in the mirror. I didn't mean for this to happen like, Thomas." I cut him off again. "Stop. You made your choices. Now you live with them." For a long moment, neither of us moved. The cicadas hummed in the trees. A dog barked 2 houses down. The world kept spinning. And Thomas Powell? He stood on my porch like a man looking at the burning wreckage of a house he built and torched with his own hands. I stepped back. "Go home." He looked down, then back at me. "Where is that now?" he asked. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He turned and walked down the steps, slower than he'd arrived, shoulders sagging, tie flapping in the wind. A hollow man finally realizing the empire he thought he ruled had already changed locks. I watched him disappear into the night, then close the door behind me. What he never realized, what he still didn't know, was that the email. It wasn't even the final play. It was just the checkmate. Because somewhere in Audrey's inbox, there was another email. Same subject line, different attachments, and she deserved closure too. It unraveled faster than I could have ever predicted. 2 weeks. That's all it took. 14 days after the email. 14 days of silence on my end, of chaos on his. Audrey left him in a flurry of glitter and passive-aggressive empowerment. She packed up her things, what little she'd moved into the condo, and vanished one morning while Thomas was on a call with his accountant. Not a note, not a goodbye. Just a photo posted to her Instagram, her manicured hand wrapped around a green smoothie, the city skyline behind her, captioned, "Sometimes love just isn't enough." I almost felt bad. Almost. He tried to reach me that same night. My phone lit up with his name, twice, 3 times in a row, Thomas Powell in that bold font that used to make my heart flutter. I watched it ring, the screen glowing like a lighthouse on my nightstand, and I let it go dark. No voicemail, just silence. Then he tried the boys. Kevin told me later. He said he missed how things used to be. I told him to grow up. Ryan didn't answer at all. By then, the Whisper network had started. Duluth isn't a big town. Even the secrets are shared like sugar across back fences. I heard from Charlotte, my friend from the tennis club, that he'd sold the cabin up in Blue Ridge, the one he swore we'd retire in, back when we still believed in dreams. Gone. Next was the car. That overpriced, impractical Porsche he insisted on getting during his midlife crisis. The same car he used to drive Audrey to wine tastings and yoga retreats. Sold. Then the boat. The boat. His pride. His ego on water. Gone. He tried listing himself as an independent consultant on LinkedIn. Updated his profile photo, one of those stiff corporate shots with forced confidence, and a graying beard he hadn't yet come to terms with. I heard he applied to work with a firm in Atlanta. Didn't even get a second interview. The man who once strolled into country club fundraisers like he owned the place was now refreshing his inbox like a college grad with a useless degree. And me? I was packing. Kevin had always dreamed of Paris. He was 8 the first time he saw the Eiffel Tower in a movie. "One day, Mom," he'd whispered, "I want to see that for real." I made good on that promise. We boarded a flight in early spring just after the cherry blossoms began to bloom. It was still chilly, but magical, the kind of weather that makes hot cocoa feel like a spell. We did it all, the Louvre, the catacombs, the back alleys of Montmartre where artists still sketch strangers for 20 euros. But nothing compared to the night we stood along the Seine, the tower glittering in the distance, casting diamonds across the water. Kevin slipped his hand into mine, bigger now than I remembered, a young man's hand, no longer a boy's. His voice broke the silence. "I'm proud of you, Mom." The words struck something deep in my chest. I blinked away the sting in my eyes and smiled. "I'm proud of me too," I whispered. We stood there, the air filled with the distant sounds of laughter and the hum of boats gliding beneath the bridges. In that moment, everything, the betrayal, the unraveling, the loss, felt distant, like a chapter already read, dog-eared and closed, but not finished. Because even as the city sparkled around us, I knew there was still one more thing I had to do. Not for revenge, not for closure. For me. For the woman I used to be, and the one I had become, and I had just the plan to make it count. I stood in front of the mirror in my new home. The late afternoon light poured through the sheer white curtains, bathing everything in gold. The walls, warm ivory, smooth as cream, were still bare, but it didn't matter. The house was quiet, uncluttered. The air smelled faintly of lavender and new beginnings. No echoes of slammed doors, no tension vibrating in the walls. Just peace. It was mine. Truly mine. Not bought out of anger, not out of desperation or some petty attempt to prove I'd won. It wasn't a trophy. It was a promise. To myself. To the woman I used to be. The one who slept beside a stranger for years. Who watered a dead garden. Who smiled through betrayal just to keep her boys from breaking. That woman was gone. I stepped closer to the mirror and looked at her. At me. My reflection didn't flinch anymore. The lines around my eyes were deeper, yes, but they weren't cracks. They were marks of survival. Testimonies. I traced the corner of my mouth with my finger. The faintest lift of a smile played there. Subtle, strong, unshakable. I wasn't the woman who begged for love anymore. I wasn't the wife in the shadows, praying for scraps of attention at dinners where he barely made eye contact. I wasn't a placeholder or a silent partner in someone else's fantasy. No. I was Carmen Powell, 42, mother of 2 strong, loyal boys, a woman who'd rebuilt from ash without once raising her voice, a survivor with grace sharpened into steel, a strategist, and now, a writer. I walked across the oak floors barefoot, each step echoing softly in the kind of silence that soothes, not suffocates. On the sleek marble kitchen counter sat my laptop, waiting. No unopened emails. No passive-aggressive reminders. Just a blank document glowing on the screen. I sat down, my fingers hovering above the keys. Then I began to type. The Art of Quiet Revenge. I let the title linger there just for a moment. It wasn't vindictive. It was truth. Below it, I typed the first chapter heading. Chapter 1. Smile Through the Wreckage. A soft chuckle escaped me. Because that's what I'd done, hadn't I? While he strutted around with his shiny new accessory, thinking I was home crumbling, thinking I would collapse under the weight of his absence, I smiled. I threw parties. I showed up radiant and unbothered. I didn't shout, didn't rage, I just watched and waited. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it's the kind that doesn't need witnesses. It's the life you build in silence, the moments no one photographs but you never forget. Sometimes it's sipping espresso in a quiet Paris cafe with your son, while your ex tries to sell off the last things that gave his name meaning. It's dancing barefoot in your own kitchen. It's having money in the bank and peace in your chest. It's not needing to prove you were right, because time already did that for you. I leaned back in my chair, the screen glowing softly in the dusk. I thought of the last words Thomas had spoken to me, on that porch, fists clenched, eyes wide with disbelief that I had outplayed him. I thought of Audrey, who'd posted another cryptic Instagram story about learning to choose herself, her eyes swollen behind a filter. I thought of the boat, the car, the cabin, of the way his empire had folded in on itself like wet paper. And then I thought of me, of Kevin's smile in front of the Eiffel Tower, of Ryan asking if I could help him budget his first apartment, of the way they looked at me now, not as a mother who stayed for too long, but as a woman who left at exactly the right time. I began to type again. This book isn't about getting even, I wrote. It's about getting free. A knock came at the door. Soft, tentative. I paused, listening. My heart didn't race. That was how I knew I was healed. No dread, no sinking feeling, just quiet curiosity. When I opened it, there stood Laura, my old neighbor. She clutched a small potted plant and gave me a sheepish smile. I was in the neighborhood, she said. Thought maybe you could use a housewarming gift. I stepped aside, gesturing her in. Only if you stay for wine. Her smile widened. That night, we laughed like teenagers in my kitchen, red wine in hand, retelling stories from a different lifetime, when we were wives pretending everything was fine. We talked about new jobs, about dreams we'd buried too long. When she left, she squeezed my hand and said, I never told you this, but watching you, it gave me courage. I stood in the doorway long after she was gone, the moon casting silver streaks across the floor. I never screamed. I never begged. I just waited, planned, moved quietly in the background while they danced in the spotlight. And now, they were left with their ashes. And I, Carmen Powell, was just getting started. And if you enjoyed this powerful story of female revenge, leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories like this one. There's plenty of twists, emotion, and justice coming your way. Oh, click the video that's popping up on your screen right now to watch another breathtaking revenge story. The next one might be even more intense. I'll see you there.